to the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Off the Mats podcast. And for this episode, I want to welcome Mr. Dan Joseph, who is the author of Backpack to Rucksack, Insight into Leadership and Resilience by Military Experts. I connected with Dan through email and took a look at some of the notes and research that he had done, because he had mentioned anxiety and jiu-jitsu, and those are two key words for me. Jiu-jitsu for sure, and then anxiety, because as many of you may know listening to the podcast that I've mentioned, I still have regular panic attacks before I go into training. It is getting better, but talking here with Mr. Joseph, I want to get some insights from him and just kind of learn a little bit more about his research and just his experiences in the Army and on the mats as well. So Dan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey man, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for the intro. And yeah, definitely not Mr. Joseph, just Dan. But hey bro, you being real about panic attacks, I just want to say something about that. You know, we can get into this, but I still struggle with that. And there's been times, I don't know about you, but man, I'd show up to the mats, right? And I'd be in my car, and all of a sudden I feel that the heart, increase adrenaline, like, all right, about to go in there. And where I go, it's a madhouse, dude, because it's like an MMA type situation. There's an MMA mat going on, Muay Thai, boxing downstairs, jiu-jitsu. So it's crazy, man. A lot of energy. And there's been days where I'll show up and then I walk in and then I turn around and go back to my car like, yeah, you know what? Actually, don't know if I'm up for this today. And then I've legit done that like 7 times one time. And I realized like, hey, this anxiety thing's real. And I don't feel as stupid talking about this because I was in the locker room one time, right? I think it might have been that day or the next day. And this dude came out, was talking to his buddy as they were getting dressed or whatever. And I'm sitting there like looking in the mirror, shaving or whatever I was doing. And he's like, hey, bro, like, I didn't see you yesterday. And the other guy's like, yeah, man, I couldn't come in, dude. I showed up and then I realized like I couldn't handle it, man. So I drove home. And I remember thinking like, dude, I kind of wanted to go over to that guy and be like, bro, thanks for saying that, because I felt crazy the other day. So I know people struggle, man. The struggle is real. The struggle is real.
Yeah, one of the things that I never even knew, it just none of this occurred to me, especially growing up. My wife now wonders that when I was a kid, I had asthma. I don't know if I had asthma though. Maybe it was panic attacks. It would, like, my wife and I started talking about it, and I was like, yeah, I never had, I was a runner. I never had trouble with breathing, but I always had trouble at certain times. And then it was like, you know what? That was probably anxiety just getting the best of me. But it didn't really become a thing until I actually started training. Now, I had a job that made me feel a little funky, but as I look back now, I start connecting. But anytime I would, show up to the mats, I'd sit in the car for about 15 minutes, go through some breathing exercises, try to really get myself together, and then go in. The thing is, go through the warm-ups and everything, and then you start drilling, and I'm still always feeling kind of funky. I don't really feel right until, we go into live sparring, and then I get dropped on my head or something. I'm like, okay, it's reality. Wake up. You got to be here now. You got to be present. But that's a thing about, just having anxiety and just any kind of issues with mental health, is being present and being aware of it and being, up front, instead of trying to squash it down and hide it and say, oh, well, it's not a problem, because it becomes
Yeah,
a
man. In
bigger problem when you
psychology,
do that.
hey, man, in psychology, they call it anticipatory anxiety. It's basically, when you're going to go to the dentist, right? And you think about getting drilled and then you go get a filling or whatever it is. And it's never as bad as you thought. Same thing with joining the military. I thought it was going to be this whole scary situation. Then you join and it's like, oh, dude, wait, that was not what everybody made it out to be. Right. And so same with jujitsu. It applies universally. So yeah, once I learned that phrase, anticipatory anxiety, that's when I realized we all tend to make things a bigger deal. It's a survivalistic mechanism, right? And it depends on our upbringing and what we bring to the table. But some of us have it heightened more than others.
Yeah, I always look at my daughter now with how she reacts to things, and I worry. And I say to my wife, "Is like, is this something? Is she picking up this habit from me? Like, what's going on?" Because years ago, she's 7, but as she's growing up, it's like as she's getting older, worry becomes a bigger thing for her, and then
Mhm.
these scenarios that, like, she went over something yesterday. My wife goes, "That was a whole scenario of something that it like you just went over a whole thing that I don't think that's ever going to happen." But yeah, I think that is a thing with a lot of us, like you said, going to the dentist, going into the army, going into jiu-jitsu. My best friend, she talks about ice skating. I'm not crazy about ice skating. It's not my thing to do. I tried it once. I fell a few times. I was like, this is not something I want to pursue. I don't see myself ice skating ever again. And her thing was, well, the big thing is getting over that first fall. Once you get over the first fall, you know, you'll be fine. I was like,
Mhm.
maybe for you. For me, I know that first fall, third, fifth, seventh, all the odd number falls sucked.
Yeah.
But the anxiety of that went away. Like, after a couple falls, I kept falling. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, I'm going to, play out the rest of the time, but no thanks. Now, as far as jujitsu goes, or even football, when I played football, I don't know that I had any nervousness or like any issues going out to the
Mhm.
field. And it could be because it was a team atmosphere. So there's a bunch of us there, perhaps.
Yeah. One thing that'll help your daughter out, and I think I learned this from Tim Ferriss, but I've studied it in psychology as well. So what she may be doing, but what's really common is called catastrophizing. So catastrophizing is thinking the worst case scenario, right? But there's this game you can play where you can catastrophize to the most dramatic, insane extent ever, like completely fictional almost. And then once you draw that out, you realize like, oh, it's never going to be that bad, and this is my brain playing tricks on me. Like, literally take it out to the point of, I'm going to show up to jujitsu and somebody's going to choke me out, and then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to cry, and then when I cry everyone's going to make fun of me, and then I'm going to get in my car and drive home crying and get in an accident, and something's going to blow up and the world's going to end. Just go like off the Richter scale with it, and then you can almost tease out the ridiculousness in your nervous system, and then it puts everything back in perspective, and it's sort of a creative outlet as well. And I know you're into comics, right? So there you go, you can create a whole comic strip based off of that, create a superhero or something, a super villain. But yeah, just fun ways to flex with psychology.
Yeah. For me, what has helped from time to time is I always label myself as an optimistic realist. So, I go in expecting the best, but I'm prepared for the worst to happen. And the worst never really happens. It's like, what's the worst that happens when I go into training? For me, the worst that can happen is I don't understand the technique and I keep messing it up. And then it comes this game of, and my coach and I were talking about this last week with drilling. It's like getting it perfect and doing it perfect over and over. Got to get it perfect. And then when we went to live sparring, it wasn't perfect, but I still hit the move. And I think the worst that can happen for me is, again, just, even though I hit the move, it's not perfect, because in my mind I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, sure, I hit it, but it's not perfect. Now I'm gonna continue to think about that. Meanwhile, my coach is like, no, dude, you did right. But I
Mm,
continue to beat myself up over it. And that's just something where I always try to figure out where's that coming from, because I've never had overbearing teachers or parents or anyone, grandparents. No one ever tried to make me feel like I had to be perfect. And I don't try to make my daughter feel like she has to be perfect. No, but it's just when it comes to my coaches, I'm like, oh, I got to be perfect. I got to get this perfect. And they're like, dude, just understand the move and understand the ideal, and where you're going with the move. You'll get there. But that's where that anxiety kind of gets me. Is like,
yeah.
I say, okay, the the worst that's going to happen is I completely screw this up in front of coach. and it's not even a matter of like thinking that people are going to laugh at me. It's then a matter of thinking, then I start beating myself up. Am I cut out for this? Even though I've been doing it for
Mm,
8 years, so like yeah, about 8 years now. It's
mm.
like, am I cut out for this? And it's like, it just like you said, you start thinking about all the crazy things that goes from there.
Yeah, man. So the worst thing that could happen to me did happen to me, and that was so like I went into a full blown freeze response. And that's because so when I was a kid, I experienced some physical abuse. And so what happened is I had to go through therapy after actually because of jujitsu, which is pretty funny. But um when I was on the mats, man, I started freezing up, like straight up just frozen. And the coach was looking at me. My coach was yelling at me, like, what are you doing? Execute the move, like do the move. I just showed you this. I was drilling the reps, right? But when I was sparring it, when it was live, I got super nervous and I shut down. And what happened was so just like little again psych breakdown here. Um, Depending on someone's psychological developmental stage in life, when they experience a certain trauma or a certain event, it'll affect their brain different ways. So because I was super young when some stuff happened to me, I didn't have a motor neuron response to like offensively protect myself. I could ball up and defend myself. That's because all I could do as a kid was that. Um, and like massive dissociation, like leaving my body, not being present for the event, just floating off into a corner of the room is what they say people do when they're like attacked and they can't escape the situation. So in jujitsu, I was getting put in situations that kind of made me feel, which I didn't know because I didn't have like an active memory of what went on when I was younger, right? It was sort of trapped in my body. So as my body went through certain feelings, certain positions, certain pressure points and whatnot, my nervous system was just like 5 alarm fire and it just froze. And so I was in my 30s in a flashback from a childhood thing. And long story short, man, when I left the mats, I just had some like ruminations, some heavy thoughts, uh, like a lot of like difficulty breathing and controlling my breath and just getting my nervous system revved back down. Um, the hypervigilance was like through the roof. And one of my buddies, he's a really good dude. He's a total badass DEA agent, like door kicker, does some awesome stuff. And um, he was like, he came over and I talked to him about what was going on because I was doing 2-a-days in jujitsu, right? So I was like getting double doses of this stuff. And he's like, hey, dude, I want you to go see my therapist. I'm like, what? Guys don't see therapists. Like, get out of here. You see a shrink, bro? And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, because I would not be able to marry my wife and have the life I have now if it wasn't for therapy. So I went and saw him, and yeah, man, we worked through it, and he got those demons out, and it was a heavy process, still a struggle for sure, but I don't really have the freeze response as much. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm able to work through that, but it took it took intentional relationships with mentors on the mats to tell them my level of crazy, um, and ask them like brothers to walk alongside me on the mats to not make me feel weird about this stuff, to guide me through it, man, to remind me to breathe, to help me get back into my body, like you were saying, right? Which is so friggin' that's so wise, just that concept of, hey, be present right now in your body. Don't be in the future, don't be in the past. You got to be present right now. And it's a lot easier said than done. And all this stuff applies to vets with PTS, man. That's why I try to tell them as much as possible to get on the mats and it helps with like easing self-medication and stuff, to get back in your body. But you pay a price for it though. You know what I mean? You do pay a price. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you actually kind of brought that up there, because I thought about this when our gym kind of had a bit of a change over the last couple years now. When I started, we were a smaller gym, and we are very, very tight knit, and it was like you go there and it's family, and it's family here now, but it's a bigger gym. And for me, I still like coming back to the mats now with these changes. It doesn't feel like before, where I got out on the mats, my team is there with me. We're there working together. Or we talk about competition upcoming, or we talk about, you know, just training, again, I was doing 2 a days as well. So it was like, okay, well, we got this class tonight. Now I come in and it's more like I feel like a stranger. So I see the groups, I see people, kind of working well together and buddying up. And I feel like and it's still the same people that I've trained with before. It just feels like, oh, I'm the outsider now. And I think sometimes that's where the anxiety kind of kicks me in the throat. I'm like, uh-oh, like I'm the loner again. I've always been that
Mm,
kid though, where I've always been, whether it be when I moved from Detroit to Flint, I was a new kid and I was by myself wearing glasses. I was a black kid listening to rock music and Madonna.
mm,
I was for sure an outcast, at that time, especially in 89, 88, and 89. Then when I moved to Newark, Delaware, again, I'm the new kid, I'm the outcast, so I'm off by myself. It wasn't there long, then we moved here to Maryland, and by this point, I'm whatever, 14 maybe. I've kind of set in my ways now. I am that guy. I'm just a loner. I'm going to try to fit in, but I'm not going to compromise who I am to fit in. So, and that's how I feel now, even with the mats. And, it, I love my gym, a lot of great, guys and gals there, but I also don't want to feel like when I go in, I'm wedging myself into like, hey, you guys are, working on, lasso. I want to work on lasso. Can I work on lasso with you guys? Meanwhile, I'm not a lasso guy. If I end up in lasso, it was definitely an accident, and I don't want to be there. So I don't know.
man,
It's the
that really impacts me, dude. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, no,
I
you're
was the
good.
loner too, man. I just want to say, like, loner to loner, bro. It's cool. It's cool to meet another one who owns it, right?
Yeah,
I like it because what I learned is that ties into divergent thinking. So it makes you a unique individual because all that recipe that formulates who you are, that gives you a unique lens in life, and that's your value to humanity, to society. Is now you're this person who bridges gaps. You're this person who can exist in that awkward place where people, that limbo, where people would feel so uncomfortable. Those people have to fill silence with words, like they're not
mhm,
comfortable being in that place where something feels out of sorts. But when you're that guy who lives, that's your zip code, right? you're you're almost like, I don't know, a Sherpa to people. Like, you can guide people through that, through feelings of loneliness, through isolation. You can give people language to understand their feeling states because you exist as an outlier, and you can see the herds and how they operate. So I just want to affirm that in you, man, because that touched my
yeah,
heart, because I've always felt kind of like apologetic for it, but then you can apologize for who you are. Because then what kind of life is that?
yeah,
So I almost, and talk about comics and superheroes. That's where I see, like, the idiosyncrasies in ourselves that makes us that is our superpower, right? The stuff that we were made fun of, that's the kind of stuff that makes us great if we can embrace it and own it. And I'm still
yeah.
trying to do that. So I just want to say thanks for mentioning that.
No, thank you. I mean, you set the table, and I just ate. Um, I think y- like you said there, you can't apologize for being who you are, and I, I used to find myself apologizing a lot for no reason. I still do. I like just I'm an apologetic person, and but for who I am though, I don't apologize. And I was just talking to a buddy yesterday about this with the podcast. I have three different podcasts, and they're all uniquely me. it, and I was told by a few people, hey, I can get this person on the show for you, I can get that person on the show for you. It's like, I don't want those people on the show, no offense. I want to talk to people that you know I have interest in knowing their story, number one. Number two, I want to speak to people that there's a connection, there's a rapport built there, where I don't feel like we could both just be sitting here. Like, I have notes, I have questions here. I could just very easily sit here and ask these questions, and it's super dry. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God. And I never want the show to ever be that. I want the show to feel very, just laid back, and you can be comfortable. I always tell people, when you're around me, Never feel like uncomfortable. Don't feel like you can't be you, because I'm for sure going to be me. And sometimes it can get weird. And I want others to embrace the weirdo in themselves. If they feel that comfort, go for it. And there are times where, again, that's how I beat my anxiety,
Mm,
is realizing like, look, we all have these weird things going on. Like coach used to always say to me, be first. When you get on the
mm,
mats, be first. Get your grips first. If you're gonna go for the takedown, be first. If you're gonna pull guard, be first. Be first. And like there are times where I get into a room and it's like, okay, we're all awkwardly sitting here. All right, be the first one to break that
mm.
awkwardness by showing that you are awkward. So uh,
Yeah, man. You know what I really,
crazy.
you know who I uh really admire on the mats are those guys that come up. There's one or two guys when there's like 20 of us posted up, warming up or just stretching before class, and they'll go around the perimeter of the room and shake every single dude's hand. Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. I mean, I don't even know the guy, right? But that to me, and that's what I love about jujitsu, man. It's got such a primal feel to it. It's got such a tribal feel where he doesn't care that I'm a stranger. I'm on the mat that he's going to train on. He's going to trust me to choke him out, to put his vital, his vital, I guess organs, whatever it is, just carotid, jugular in my grip, right, and to let go. I mean, that's a level of trust, that's a level of love and respect that we have for each other, and it always impacts me when I see someone do that because there are times where I'm so in my head. I'm all about my problems. I'm being selfish. I'm easily self-centered, right? I mean, that's just one of my struggles in life. And jujitsu reminds me, dude, it's not about you, man. This is about the people around you. You're gonna make them better. They're gonna make you better. Sparks are gonna fly because when iron sharpens iron, that's what happens, right? Sparks fly. So it's not gonna be pretty. There's gonna be tough roles. There's gonna be tough personalities, but um like be present through that, look at people in their eyes, make that comfortable eye contact. This isn't fight mode, right? And I have to talk to myself like this often. There are some days, man, I'm on a good streak, things are good. I'm able to manage my nervous system, my anxiety, all of that. But when there's something going on, oftentimes it's hard for me to recalibrate that. And then I look towards those people who come to the mats and they're struggling with their own stuff because they're human too, but they're at least showing up and being present in a way that's, I don't know, it's just so authentic and so it's inspiring to me, man. And it makes me want to be a better human being. Just less selfish.
I absolutely understand and agree. There's just this thing to it where, I mean, again, it betters you. If you're just outward, you're looking out to take care of your team. You're looking out for your team. Like you said, when you're out there on the mat, you know, you're there to make each other better. I feel that
Mm,
that not just only translates on the mat, but also just, physically, but also mentally. I have
mhm,
a teammate, he and we message each other uh probably yeah, every day. And a lot of times it's just, he'll say, I got this thing going on the mat, I'm competing, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And they're just, things like that I feel like it's important that, we are comfortable to open up about, and where we feel safe. Um
mm,
like I'm wanted to ask you, I guess, one thing when it comes to people being open about it, because
mm,
I post a bit on my Instagram about mental health awareness. I get a little bit of pushback sometimes from
mm,
people. Mainly people who say, well, if you keep thinking about this stuff, it's gonna be a problem. And it's like,
mm,
well, like I didn't want to think about it. Trust me, like a lot of
mm,
stuff was a problem before, you know, social media was a thing.
mm.
Um, like what are your thoughts on people who kind of give that pushback?
So I would say, and this is, look, we all have inherent biases, right? So take this with a grain of salt because I try to be as objective as possible, but I'm human. So there's going to be subjective aspects to what I say. So based on my purview on how I've lived in life, that to me could seem like a defensive mechanism. And this is why. by telling somebody, don't put language to it, because words are powerful things. In the military, we always say words mean things. It sounds so, dumb. I hate hearing it, but it's super powerful, philosophically speaking. When you put words on something and you create a label for it, and this is super important, don't ever label yourself. Label label a situation, label a feeling, but don't label yourself. This is, man, I can rant about that for days, but it's super important. Anyway, when you when you create labels for a psychological phenomenon, it allows you to then understand that enemy. Like in the military, if I don't know what the enemy is, if we don't know the enemy's capabilities and who they are and their intent, then it's a ghost. It's going to be this ethereal, ubiquitous fear that sets in. But once you know what the enemy is, right, you can box him in. These are the dimensions. These are the parameters. This is the enemy's striking distance. This is the weapons that they have. This is the payload that they carry. Here's all the different avenues of approach they would take. Most likely course of action, most deadly course of action. This is how we assess the enemy in the military. Okay, so psychologically speaking, it's just as real as that process. Um, and what this person may be doing is, by you mentioning this, they say if you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that barks the loudest is the one that got hit by the rock. So I would maybe look into this. Well, it depends how close you are to this person, but think about what you just said may have impacted them personally. And they're saying, hey, man, I don't want to admit this stuff to me. So therefore, by you labeling this and putting it out there, now I have to see it. So sweep it back under the rug. Don't talk about it. Otherwise, you're weak. And look, man, if you repress an emotion, it's going to compound it. You can't repress a feeling state and make it go away. It needs to be repressed. People are, it's awkward, man, seeing them live life because they explode in different ways. It's like squeezing jello. It's going to come out somewhere else, right? Um and Man, there's so much I want to say. Another thing is mental health is such a canned word right now. There's so much that here's the issue with psychology when the mainstream media or mainstream public gets word of it, or gets a handle on it. And it's not our fault for doing this. If you don't have a clinician's background in it, and you haven't studied it in a deep manner, people throw words on things that it feels like lip service to an extent, is one aspect of like, okay, everything's mental health, everything's anxiety. And I totally understand that, and I can appreciate the frustration of that. Um, but when you go into the nuances and you do state, hey, there's specificity in how we're experiencing this stuff. There's different types of anxiety, there's different types of trauma, and even those words again are like so overplayed, right? Everybody's posting about this stuff. But what's important is to realize we can care about the specifics. We can care about the individual stuff without making huge blanket generalizations that everyone has to put up with. And now I'm kind of going to the weeds, so I'll shut up after this. But I would say that his argument is valid because he's got his opinion for sure. But for him to say, you shouldn't post this stuff because now you're creating the problem, that's a psychological control mechanism right there that happens usually. And I'll stop with this. It happens, from what I understand, from what I've studied, when you look at systems, right? Not just dyads, which is like interpersonal dynamics, like me and you, but when you look at group dynamics of people and cultures, when somebody says, I need you to stop talking about that because you're the problem when you talk about it. Now, it's the elephant in the room, but they say, if you mention the elephant in the room, you are the problem. That's a sign of an unhealthy organization, an unhealthy system, because it begs the question, why are you invested in keeping the elephant invisible in the room? That creates cognitive dissonance. If somebody is invested in creating and supporting cognitive dissonance, a lot of questions need to be asked, and that's uncomfortable.
No, absolutely. And there have been times where I've kind of, have pushed back at people with that. I don't do it too often because I don't get into the comments too often because that causes a whole nother issue in itself. But once in a while, I'll, well, for the mental health post, I look at the comments because I've had a few people reach out through the comments, and, I'll fire back and we'll talk in the DMs. But, you know, from time to time, you'll come across someone that has something, nasty to say. And, like one of the words you said earlier was trauma. And that's a big one that people hate to see now is trauma, because everything is trauma, this, trauma, that. And the unfortunate thing is it exists, and we kind of have to address it to an extent to get over it, because you know there are things that happen to us that we may not even remember. Something might trigger, there might be a song that plays, and then you're like, holy shit, like what is this about? And then now you got to dig deeper, and you know before long you've pulled a band-aid off a wound that probably you know needs the air. But initially you're like, maybe I shouldn't have pulled at that bandage. And we have so many scenarios now, especially with people being more vocal, talking about their own traumas, almost to the point now where the gentleman, as an example, who said, hey, don't post about this, you know for them it could just be like, this is all I'm ever seeing anywhere now. Like, I'm tired. Like, I come to your page to not see this. And as I've explained to a couple individuals who asked me to stop posting mental health stuff on my jiu-jitsu page, I explained to them, like, look, you know, number one, it's my page, so I will post what I please. Number two, you don't have to be here. And that sounds kind of dickish. I get it, but I'm very blunt about that. No one's telling anyone to follow anyone else. And then number three, you can make your own page and post. You can take the stuff that I post. You can take all the jiu-jitsu memes and technique videos. You can take those all, because I repost them from other people too. So you can take all those things from me and disinclude the mental health stuff if you want and make it your own thing. But I'm going to continue to do this because there might be one person that sees that, and it helps them. And
Yeah,
if
man.
if, if
Yeah,
it one hits one, I've done my
worth
job.
it. Absolutely, man. And that's so brilliantly put what you said. I mean, this whole concept of, yeah, just trying to police you up, right? For what you're saying. It's like, dude, this is my page. This is what's on my heart right now. And I understand if someone says, hey, like, if I'm here on your page, I only want you to curate jujitsu information because that's why I'm coming to you. But then again, that's their expectation, right? That's not the reality. Their expectation is it should be only jujitsu. But in the reality, you're a human being who can make off the cuff decisions. And that's part of your creative makeup and who you are and your freedom, right? As a person on this planet. So they they should look into, like you said, they can go into their own page, but then create their own page or create their own content. But I would want to ask them, and this is tough, man. And this isn't like me trying to be disrespectful or on a soapbox because I needed to ask myself that, and I still do today. Why am I reacting like that? People do not like to ask why. When you tug on that thread, like you said, you can pull a band-aid off a bleeding artery and then realize, like, holy smokes, I need a tourniquet in my life. I don't need just this band-aid, whatever the issue is, because self-disclosure is tough. Disclosing things to ourselves from life in general is just, it's really tough to do when it's the ugly truth. But it's important for us to ask, like, why am I so pissed off? And what's common in my life, if I don't like somebody, say I see somebody on the mats in jiu-jitsu and they're just obnoxious, right? And they're just, way too violent or out of control emotionally or just disrespectful or condescending. A lot of this stuff were ego defensive mechanisms I used to have in life when I was self-medicating. I was drinking alcohol. I was, doing drugs. I was in a lifestyle where I didn't want to admit what happened to me in the past. I had this armor up, right? That's why I love this is why I love like the Avengers and comics, because if you look at every single superhero, they represent a psychological maladaptive behavior that's become a superpower. Maladaptive meaning it's not the healthiest thing, but now they're using it as a strength. So take Iron Man. Iron Man has this suit of armor, right? But what is he inside? He's an insecure dude, doesn't have a great relationship with his father, right? Feels completely abandoned by his father. has a massive ego, narcissistic ego defenses, but he knows that he's frail. He knows that he's just some rich kid who inherited a company that doesn't feel super worthy. So he creates a suit of armor that is a heroic figure of justice. And you see this in jiu-jitsu. You see guys show up and some of them will just posture, man. They'll grip way too hard. They'll grab at your throat. They'll throw a knee or an elbow when they're not supposed to because they're spazzing and they're out of control. And it's like, dude, stop trying to act strong right now. Need you to just like do the technique, take a breath, like let your nervous system come back down and stop trying to be this superhero on the mats. Like none of us are trying to be superheroes. I mean, you don't see a black belt do that. Black belts are the most gentle people when they grab you, when they want to execute the move, then they'll pull and they'll tug and they'll do whatever the death roll that they're going to do to snap you off, right? But initially, they don't come at you with this like, oh, I need you to know that I'm the boss. I need you to know that I'm the big guy here, right? There's this humility to it. And anyway, a lot of this has to do with what people do to compensate. And I was doing a lot of that earlier. And jujitsu helped break me out of that because there were people alongside me that can say, hey man, you do that again, and I'm gonna check you, right? Or they'll just straight up put that knee of justice or that shoulder of justice on me and make sure that they hammer it out of me so I don't behave like that because it's disrespectful on the mats. So I just don't know where I went with this tangent other than to say our egos do come out on the mats and in our subconscious behavior as well. Um, but what's really cool, so posting something online or being passive aggressive in a conversation is one thing. But you try to pull stuff on the mats. And I love that phrase, man, that the mats don't lie because somebody's going to
Mhm.
feel it and they're going to react to it. And then you get in real time a physical response to the attitude or behavior that we carry in. And it's corrective. It's a corrective action and it might feel violent at times, but I believe it's done in love because what would be unloving is to let me go back in the world carrying myself the way that I do because I'd rather be punched in the face on the mats by a brother that I trust than punched in the face by an enemy in the world that I didn't see coming who just right took me out. So, man, sorry, just went on a rant there.
I don't know that's awesome. That's what I love about doing podcasts this way, especially is I like to have that room for just open conversation, open thought. Because, like I said, I got questions here, and honestly, as I even look at the questions, I don't even know how to ask these questions. Like, it's like they're simple questions, but it's like, I mean, we've gone so deep. It's like I don't know. My questions now feel like let's just keep the conversation going. Like we're rolling here. Uh, Actually, when you mentioned the superheroes analogy there, my
Mm,
wife was walking by and I had a picture that a friend of mine gave me years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I want to get to that picture. I gotta bring this up. And like I flagged her down real quick. I was like, hey, hand me that. And it's
mm,
DC uh heroes. And it basically says in today's world, superheroes have issues too. It talks about
mm,
Batman, he needs anger management.
mm,
Uh Dr. Fate, painfully shy because he's behind his mask. Green Lantern, he's green with envy. The Joker, just crazy. Superman, dual personality. Riddler, bipolar. It's just all these different things. And granted, it's meant as a joke, but it is true when you look at, our heroes, in the media, in the sense of comic books, uh, just entertainment, period. You know, it's a, kind of a show that, that's up because this is what, you know, the media, paparazzi, whoever the hell is in their face with microphones all the time taking pictures. So it's like, here, I got to give you this thing. I mean, using Iron Man as that example, I mean, you know, just looking at the movie, you see this guy who's, a genius inventor, and he does have all these issues behind the mask. I mean, in the comics, back I want to say it was 77, so a year before I was born, they did the story called or it was 76, Demon in a Bottle. And he's an alcoholic. He's
mm.
drunk in his armor out there fighting and getting his ass kicked. And that became a huge story because for that time, especially, this wasn't something that was being kind of talked about, in this media. So, but that's kind of one of those first times you really kind of see those layers getting peeled back and saying, "Oh, wait a minute, he's hiding stuff. He's putting on this armor to get away from who he is. Now, who he is, follow him into the armor, and it's causing a
Mhm.
bigger problem." And I get with Robert Downey Jr. in his history of substance issues. He did say in the interview that he would not ever want to adapt the Demon in the Bottle story to film if they ask him to, and understand and
Mhm.
respect it. But it would have been interesting to see, that kind of brought to, and they touched on it a little bit in Iron Man 2, just a little bit. The show, when he was at the party, he was drinking. But like you said, you know, we have, like, in jiu-jitsu especially, kind of a similar thing. When my foster mother passed away back in 2019, April 2019, I was on the mat. Like, I found out Tuesday night, I trained Wednesday morning, and I remember just kind of stuffing it all down, going on the mat, trying to lose myself in the reps, and then sparring, and then afterward, I remember just sitting on the side of the mat and just it all just poured out. I just started crying, like, uncontrollably. And it wasn't even a matter of, like, I'm trying to hide or anything, or I want people to come over. It was just, this is just me in my bubble right now. And I think that's an important thing with jiu-jitsu, even though it is an individual sport, it is a team sport as well. Um, but when you're on that mat, and you're going through whatever you're going through emotionally, mentally, that is an individual thing that does lend itself to the team and family as well at times. But there are times where, like, if anyone came over to me, I don't know that I would have really spoken about what was going on
Mm.
just in that moment,
Yeah.
because it was still so raw at the time. Because this lady saved my life,
Mhm.
and I knew she was sick, and I'm sitting there, things like, fuck, I can't save her life. What can
Mm.
I do? So, there's a lot of stuff going on in that moment. Uh, but you know, it's just the world we live in.
This is the similarity is amazing in that regard because my dad, he was dying. He passed away on the 4th of July a couple years ago. And
Mhm.
I kind of say that proudly because so my family, they're immigrants to this nation, right? So they left Iraq back in the 70s, and we're like a
Okay.
Christian minority over there. And so not the prettiest existence. And so America was just the symbol of freedom that they dreamed of as teenagers, right? So they were listening to Elvis Presley and the Beatles. They were watching James Dean and Marilyn Monroe, like all on TV over there, bootleg films, and we're just like, we got to get to this country. Like, that's a place where we can be free. They love that whole aspect. And so my dad was a huge patriot, having two kids that are in the military. He was super proud of us. And so anyway, him passing on 4th of July, I was like, man, I think dad planned this because he was dying of heart disease for a while. And I feel like he's the kind of dad where he'd be like, "Don't cry for me when I die. Like, I lived my life, go live your life. Like, don't feel sad for me." And as soon as he passed away, I was on a on a building by the hospital on a parking structure by myself, the loner that I am, just trying to process this. And then I forgot it was the 4th of July, and the entire horizon lit up with fireworks shows. And I'm like, dude, my dad had to have planned this because I can't be bummed out on the 4th of July. But that morning, man, I was doing jujitsu with my buddy who he's a Marsoc Marine now, total badass, really good dude. Um, so yeah, I'd say his name, but OPSEC. I'm not allowed to say it, so he get mad at me. But love you, buddy, if he listens to this. So I hit him up and I was like, hey dude, it was like my dad's like fifth time in the hospital getting, on his quote, like deathbed or something. We weren't sure because he wouldn't take his meds and anyway, anybody who has an elderly parent who's going through this stuff, you get it when they're not taking the medicine. I'm fine. I feel good. I'm not going to take the meds, whatever. So, so I was kind of like desensitized to this because the family's always like, dad's going to die. And I'm like, dude, he's been going to die. So I hit up my buddy. I was like, "Hey, dude, I need to do some jujitsu with you, like one on one." And we do like marathon rules where we go like 60 minutes, sometimes like 90 minutes, no breaks, just roll after roll after roll. Cause we know each other and we have that trust and that camaraderie. So I hit him up and we were rolling together. And I was getting texts from the family like, hey, dad's not looking good. He's intubated. And I thought, like, there's no way dad's gonna die today. Like, he's not gonna die today. But regardless, I'm gonna get this rolling because it's my therapy. This eases my mind, right? I can't be there for my family out of my mind and anxiety through the roof. I need to center myself. I need this connection right now. So my buddy, we just rolled together and it was awesome. It was brilliant. And then I got, a phone call and they were like, hey, you might want to come up. This might be it. And I thought, okay, you know what? Let me go up there. I got my rolls in. It's probably nothing, but I'll come up. Sure enough, that was the day my dad died. But my dad knew what jujitsu meant to me. He knew how important it was for me. And try not to get too emotional here. I told my buddy, I was like, for the rest of my life, bro, because I texted him, I was like, hey, my dad died today. Later that evening, passed around like 6:30 p.m. And I told him, I was like, I just want to say thank you for doing jujitsu with me today because the rest of my life, I get to know that the day my dad died, like you were there for me. You were there on the mats with me. You helped me recenter myself and ground myself. And my father would never fault me for that. He'd be proud of me to say, hey, I'm glad you went. I'm glad you went and did jujitsu. I'm glad you went and got physical and did that. Right. And so, um, that's forever like imprinted in my mind that literally the scariest moment of my life to me was losing my dad. My whole life, I was like, I can't handle losing my father. It'll completely shatter me. And that was one of the most, I was like the strongest ever on that day. There was so much peace in there. And like faith had a lot to do with it, man, for sure.
True.
Um, but jujitsu was like, it's married to my faith. Like it's married to my spirituality. Um, and there's no greater feeling than like when this I don't want to say this like in a crass way, but I'm just gonna say it. Then when you lose your dad, but you realize how solid of a man you are. Because that's not saying like you don't need your father to be strong. It's a testament to him helping you become that. Whether or not he really directly did that, because God knows that me and my dad, we didn't like each other for a lot of our life. We didn't really connect until just before he was dying. Because I was in the army and I told him, I was like, Dad, if you die and I'm in the army, I'm not coming home. I'm not leaving training. So if there's anything you want to say, we got to get it out now. Right. And it was cool because we had this eye to eye moment finally, man, finally, where we saw each other. And yeah, it's all one big journey, you know. And jujitsu got me into my body. It made me face my past. It made me connect with my feeling states. And that allowed me to be pissed off. It allowed me to be angry. It allowed me to confront people, not in an aggressive manner, in a violent manner, but in a matter of fact way. So the more solid I was becoming in jujitsu, the more solid of a son I was to my dad. Because if I'm not going to go on the mats and just be creamed by anybody now I'm starting to understand how to fight, understand how to grapple, how to throttle violence, as I say. Well, I'm going to come back from the mats, and if my dad says something that upsets me, hey, we're just like in jujitsu, like, hey, bro, you touch me like that again, it's going to be a fight. So I need you to please, like, check yourself. Don't come at me like that. We're just drilling. We're not here to fight, right? I would start having that vocabulary with my dad. Hey, dad, like, look, you just said that. I don't want to cuss at you, dad, but I got to let you know if you say that again, I'm going to cuss at you. So, I started having these discussions where it allowed me to feel real and authentic. So then by the time he did die, I didn't have any regrets because he knew everything about me and I knew everything about him. We had this moment of transparency. And dude, I have to say it's because of the guys I met in jujitsu, man, because they taught me what it's like to talk about my feelings while at the same time exerting violence. And that to me is where dudes are different. Because when the guy who can break your neck is also teaching you how to control your breath, I mean, bro, there's something so magical in that, dude. Like, just it's badass.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a important thing there too. Just as you mentioned, the vocabulary, that you carry from training to now your outside conversations, just regular life, just your approach to things. I always feel like I fancy myself a patient person. I'm not quick to attack. I'm very, very, you know, observant of what's going on. I used to teach preschool, and I had, several children that had, you know, just bad tempers and bad attitudes. And, instead of, sending them to timeout, trying to figure out what's going on here first. I would have teachers send their kids down to my classroom as the punishment classroom. Like, I'm going to send you down to Mr. Dante. And I remember I had this one specific young man, and he would come down, and I just have him set up lunch with me and talk with him. He was super calm, peaceful, everything. It was never a problem for me. And even in my field of work now, I work with intellectually delayed individuals. I guess I think that's the lettering that it goes in. But I work with these individuals, and one of the guys that I work with, everyone talks about how much of a problem he is. And I'm like, he's not a problem at all. You just gotta listen to him. Like, understand him, understand the situation. If he's upset about something, don't get upset with him. Try to understand why he's upset. And I think about that, when violence is coming my way. And sometimes there's violence that's coming your way. It's like, I'm not trying to understand this. I got to stop it before it happens. But there are more often than not situations that I've been in where it's like, this guy is, drunk, so I'm not going to necessarily beat the guy up, but I can restrain him. I can, keep this guy in place and then get him to calm down versus flexing my ability and saying, oh, I can get this guy in a arm bar and snap his arm, and that won't be a problem at all. No, just, get his back and just seatbelt grip. That's enough to calm most people down. I was like, holy shit, I'm stuck. This guy's on me like a backpack. But it's just like kind of bringing that vocabulary and that mindset from the mats into your real world, whether it be, having a discussion with your dad, and it's like he's saying things that you're not liking, you're letting them know, like, hey, I don't want to go here, but I will, versus just flying off the handle. And like, because I see it so many times with people, it's like someone says something, they jump right into argument mode. It's like, hey man, like that could have all been avoided if ego wasn't a factor in there. That's a huge thing, is ego. Uh, like, now, when you were talking about training on the day that your dad died, and you were saying, this is your therapy. Uh, I oftentimes see the comment, jiu-jitsu is my therapy. Really, a lot of things. Weightlifting is my therapy. Jiu-jitsu is my therapy. Football is my therapy. And I've gotten pushback on that as well. Therapy is therapy. You can't use jiu-jitsu as therapy. What are your thoughts on, kind of that kind of mindset towards people finding an outlet?
I mean, look, jujitsu is the reason I went to therapy. Jujitsu forced me to have panic attacks. Jujitsu forced me to have flashbacks. And then that opened the door for me to go to therapy, because again, the mats don't lie. So whatever I was bringing in, those demons that I had in me, bro, they came to the mats with me, right? And so because of jujitsu, it immediately opened the door for therapy. So now, look, to an extent, yes, I understand what and the sentiment behind that, because had I not gone to therapy and I kept going to jujitsu, those panic attacks got louder and louder, and it got to a point where I didn't want to be alive. After about 2 weeks of two-a-days and constant flashbacks, not knowing, because I didn't know what the flashbacks were. That's why I say words are important. Labels are important, because it was a feeling state. It was experiential. In psychology, we call it like phenomenological. I was feeling this phenomenon in my body, but I didn't know what it was. So eventually my brain got tired, because hypervigilance can only last for so long. And guys with PTS understand this, man. This is why I wrote a book, because everything I explained in jujitsu, I had a combat veteran tell me, he started crying. I started crying. He's like, dude, everything you said that happens in jujitsu, I've been feeling that in my body since Iraq. And that's heavy stuff, But going back to that question about therapy and jujitsu, um, when I was having those anxiety attacks, man, I didn't want to be alive. After about 2 weeks, I was exhausted, dude. Exhausted. And I just thought, like, God, if I woke up dead, it'd kind of be a relief. I thought of like death almost felt like control alt delete, where it was like this reset of like, give me just a friggin' neural, give me a brain reset, because this is not ending. Like the sky felt heavy. The ground felt like it was going to break from under me and I was going to fall into this abyss. Like it just felt super heavy. And then, and so in that regard, jujitsu couldn't have necessarily fixed me. It got me to a breaking point. And with therapy, I was able to then grieve. I needed to access grief, man. I had to grieve like belly cries, like just this ugly cry, man, about some stuff that happened earlier in life. Now at the same time, therapy wouldn't have just helped me do that because I needed jujitsu at the same time to then like get back into my body and to notice that difference and to access more of those memories, to access more parts of myself. And here's the other thing. Therapy could shine a spotlight. Like it can create those labels, those that vocabulary. This is what you're experiencing. This is, like my therapist was like, dude, you've got textbook criteria here for early childhood abuse. Like what did he say? Significant. He's like, it was significant abuse. And the way he just dropped it, right? So clinically, so sterilely. I'm like, hey, doc, can you repeat that again? Because like this is the first, I know this is normal for you as a therapist, but this is the first time in my life I've ever been able to say this or hear this out loud. I need you to say that again. Then he said it again, then I started crying. So it felt like so naked, bro. Just crying in front of another dude felt so stupid, but I needed to do it, man. And I'm glad I did it. But then he said, he's like, you can either quit jujitsu and not have to go into these feeling states again. You can self-medicate. You can take tranquilizers. God knows how many dudes will prescribe you meds. Or you stay sober, you go back to the mats, and it's exposure therapy. But there's no psychological criteria for that. So I can get what's called flooding. Some people would say triggered, but it's flooding, emotional flooding. So the right brain, if I go to jujitsu and some guy clocks me in the jaw with his elbow, based on what I experienced as a child, I will see red fast. I will think very violent thoughts very quickly because that's flooding. Now, my left brain logic would say he bumped my chin with his elbow. Not a big deal. My head is still intact. My right brain says it's a fight. You are going to be victimized like you were when you were a kid. So you need to rip this guy's throat out. So there's a left brain, right brain situation where then I have to start thinking this is it's not just left and right brain, but then there's prefrontal cortex, which is your executive functioning, but then you have your brainstem, your fight flight response, your amygdala, where it says you better fight or you're going to die. So then the primal mechanism gets revved up at the same time. But then my prefrontal cortex has to say, do not rip this guy's throat out. It's jujitsu. He's not coming after you. This isn't, that was in the past. This is in the present. So out of respect for this guy, use your adult words. Do not react like you want to react, right? And it's a process, man. Even right now, I had to take a deep breath because this is still the struggle I have. So I have to say, like, hey, man, I've had to tell guys in the middle of a roll, like, hey, I need 30 seconds to breathe. Just 1 second, dude. Because a guy, especially if it's like multiple elbows, right? Or something sloppy, where I'm like, hey, dude, for your, I don't say this, but in my mind, I'm like, for your safety, I need 30 seconds. Like, let me just hit pause real quick, breathe for a second, and then go back in calmly. But you want to know one of the coolest things that jujitsu did for me, bro, that therapy could have never done? I was, I got clocked in the face. So there's this guy who, was a higher beltman than me, upper beltman, and he purposely tried to go for my throat a couple times. And I knew he was being a dick because I roll with a great guy. One of my mentors, he's a black belt in judo and a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Amazing guy. And we would do marathon rolls during the lockdowns. We had this underground thing going on where we'd roll 90 minutes, no breaks, double black belt, right? And so he taught me a lot about how to control, violence and all that. So after this match with this guy, I started breathing super zen. during the match. I'm like, I'm not going to let him get under my skin. And as I'm rolling, I'm like, holy smokes, my nervous system is not revving. And boom, again, disrespectful move. Again, disrespectful move. And then I thought, like, all right, this guy's a chump, but just get through the 5 minutes. And then after the match, right? I kind of had this moment where I'm sitting there, I'm breathing heavy. He didn't submit me, which was rad. And I remember sitting there just like, huh, all right, buddy. Good, like pat on the back. You didn't lose your mind and react violently. And dude, he looked at me. You know what he said, bro? He's like, "Hey, man, how did you stay so calm?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, I was trying to rock you, dude. I was trying to get you like emotional." And I wanted to slug him in the face and be like, "You dick. Like, you don't know what I've been through. And you're trying to pull this stuff on me in a match. Like, I don't even know you, bro." I didn't say that. I just kind of, that even like doubled down the pride that I had in myself of like, hell yeah, this dude was actively attacking you. And but I swear, bro, for the next few days, I'd look in the mirror and be like, who's this guy? Like, I'm not the calm guy. I'm the guy who's like wound tight and passive aggressive and nervous and scared. So, dude, thank God for jujitsu, man, because where else would I have been able to have a laboratory of violence in which I could
Yeah.
work out these variables?
Yeah, I like that term there just now, laboratory of violence. That's I never thought of that. One thing that you kind of said in there as well that just really made me think, especially about the term jiu-jitsu as my therapy is maybe the term should be more jiu-jitsu as part of my therapy because
Beautiful.
you have a combination there because and even for me when I used to go to jiu-jitsu before therapy and it felt almost counterproductive because I go to therapy and my therapist she's like so how are things and everything was great, everything was I was like I love life, it couldn't be happier, but then hours later it all
Mhm.
crept back in. So now it's kind of a flip flop where I go to therapy first and then I'll have jujitsu. So that way there's a fair assessment for my therapist to understand. But I know for me, it is kind of a double whammy. It does work both ways for me, where I also look at it as kind of a partnership. Because if I just go to therapy and I don't have jujitsu, I'm fine. But there's a rat's nest of things going on up here. If I go to jujitsu
Mhm.
without therapy, yes, I'm happy, but later on, I'm going to have that crash that causes all types of issues that I don't, and I'm like, where's this coming from? So
A huge
that's
thing about therapy, by the way, bro, is it needs to give you a toolkit. Any therapist worth his salt or her salt gives you a toolkit, like teach a man to fish, right? So it's
mhm,
not supposed to be, I'm going to keep you crippled. So you keep coming back to me. So I'm validated by your $150 a session or whatever you're paying, right? It's you're supposed to offer the client a toolkit. And then that toolkit, by the way, the number of tools you need in that toolkit depends on your family of origin and who you were growing up and how much self-regulation you already have. Because people who have well-balanced lives, in their younger years, their nervous systems, everyone gets rocked, bro. Waves knock us down in life for all 8 billion humans on this planet. Okay, that's just the reality of entropy in the universe that we're in. Um, but self-regulation is where varying degrees of therapy come into play. Because if you can self regulate 90% of the time, you just need therapy for that 10%. If you're someone like me, and I could not self regulate for about 99% of my life, I was dissociated. That I needed a heck of a lot more. Um, I wouldn't say a lot more therapy because it's not about the hours, it's about the quality, not the quantity. The
yeah,
quality that I needed was again words to explain these are your feeling states. This is how you control your breath. So, had I done jujitsu as a child, right? Then I would have already understood what a square breath is. I would have understood how to do a body scan. Am I injured? Did I just get injured or am I just hurt? Because we get knocked around on the
yeah,
mats, right? So you gotta be aware of your body, be aware of hyperextension and hyperflexion and who's doing what to which ligament on your body. Um, this all plays into having the ability to self-regulate. And so there's a lot of nuances to psychology, but I think it's dangerous to for a therapist to say like you got to keep coming back to me forever. Because like everybody needs therapy in the sense that a vehicle needs an oil change, I believe. But again, like you were saying, your therapy could be, dude, you put on a song and it got you access to those feeling states and you're able to grieve and get it out. It's if things get stuck, that's when you need to see like a clinical practitioner. When things get stuck, I call it like emotional constipation. When something is in you and you're just like, I'm getting backed up, I don't know what it is, but there's like a slew of dead bodies and I just like, I don't know, I just sobered up and realized I smashed a bunch of skulls. I mean, to be dramatic and think of this as like a comic character. um it's you look at your life and the fallout of behavior, and if there's things that you don't have labels for and they're invisible enemies, I don't know why this keeps happening, then that's probably time to go see a clinician. But like you said, man, it's a part of it. And I love hearing about the toolkit, because in my mind, and you should have expectations of what you're getting from therapy and from a therapist. You don't go in there saying like blindly, um, just make me a better person. Go in there specifically, just like in jiu-jitsu. Today, I want to work just on Kimuras. Today, I want to work on the Dars, but not the whole Dars. I just want to work on like the entry or how to go from stand up to a Dars, or whatever it is. Same thing with therapy. I want just, I need more patience, or I'm always angry when it comes to this type of person who shows up in jiu-jitsu, or this phrase in life. And you get very specific with what you dig on, and that's when it becomes actionable and personalized to you. So yeah, man, I mean I have a lot of complaints about therapy as well. If people want to complain about it, I understand. But when you go through a healthy like process with someone, it's about, just like in jiu-jitsu, you want to learn a specific move. Psychologically, we should learn specific moves to keep ourselves healthy.
Absolutely. I always think of therapy and jujitsu actually in this way of I think a lot of us need therapy, and a lot of us will say we don't. I always say give it three. Take up your first session just to kind of get to know the guy or gal. Open up a little bit. The second one to kind of build a little bit of rapport. Then the third session to kind of determine if you feel like you need to continue on or you want to continue on. Because I always feel like that three step is usually a decent indicator, not the best indicator, but it gives you somewhat of an ideal. And I feel that way with jujitsu as well. When it comes to like, your trial classes, you show up, it's like, okay, what is jujitsu? I don't know. Then, you learn a little bit, just how to fall. And I always tell people it's so important to learn how to fall because people don't know how to do that. Even if you don't stick with jujitsu, at least, that first day you learn how to fall, if that's what they go over with you, at least retain that because people fall all the time. I fall a lot at least. I don't know about everybody else. I fall more than probably any human should probably be falling. Maybe I should get that looked at. But we'll cross that bridge later. But your second class, you show up and you're like, okay, now I got kind of a little bit of a feel for the warm ups, and I have an ideal. I'm taking it a little serious. In that third session is when you come back, you say, I think I want to stick around, or maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm going to do Muay Thai instead. Because that did happen with a buddy of mine. He was like, I'm not going to do jiu-jitsu. You guys get a little too up close and personal. I'm going to go do Muay Thai. And I was like, that's fair. I can't do Muay Thai. I hit shins once, and I was like, nope. Never doing that again. I think I clanked shins on accident. It was very light. And I was down for like a week and a half. I was like, I'm just going to risk my ribs back in jiu-jitsu. Screw this. Um, I was going to ask about the book. Because I actually downloaded an e-copy of it. Because I always have a device on me somewhere, so it's easier for me to read that way versus carrying a book. I'm horrible at physical media, and I'm a child, so I lose things. I like I like tear things. So I was like, let me just get a digital copy of the book. So I want to ask you, for the listeners here, if you can kind of just go over like a brief summary of the book, like give us kind of an ideal of backpack to rucksack,
Yeah,
just kind
man.
of in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I always forget my own subtitle. So the subtitle of the book is Insight into Leadership and Resilience by Military Experts. I was in the military. I'm not combat deployed. I was in a non-deployable unit. So when I say military experts, it's not me. It's several guys in my life from different branches who taught me about leadership. And so some of them are SEALs, some of them are MARSOC Marines, Green Berets, EODs, jet pilots, helo pilots, rescue swimmers, all the branches are represented in the book. And so what happened was I left the Army less than a year ago. And I had a soldier who survived his suicide attempt my last week as a platoon leader. I was a combat engineer. And at the same time that Cody, so he wrote the intro to the book as a survivor of suicide, just giving people a word of hope and encouragement. So my buddy Austin, I was talking to him about it. He's one of my best buddies from the Army. He was a Marine before he became an Army officer. And when I wrote the book, he so 12 guys from his unit after Afghanistan died by suicide. And after I published this book, the 13th guy killed himself. And I mean, double digits, it's insane, right? That's so unimaginable. It's so hard. I mean, just putting this into words, right, is one thing. 13 killed themselves. But conceptually, I mean, how is that even reality, man? And so I still check in on Austin. He wrote the foreword to the book as well, by the way. So I still check in on Cody and Austin. Just to make sure everyone's doing all right, bro. I mean, they're alive, thank God. Especially with Cody, I could have gone to his funeral, man. That's like, there's a lot of guys who've told me, hey, don't take that for granted, because I have a lot of friends who didn't survive. So, they're the reason that I wrote the book, and I say that because I was processing a lot of weight after I got out of the military. As if I had much weight, right? I mean, these compared to the dudes who've been to war, been shot at and blown up, I tend to minimize my own issues because they're the ones that did the damn thing. But I led these guys, right? I had a lot of peers who were in war, right? Purple Heart type situations, getting wounded in combat and whatnot. And um so I thought about, like, what could I have done better as a leader? What did I do wrong as a leader? What's the reality of leadership when you're talking about emotional human beings with past wounds, but then also a very unemotional bureaucratic system of red tape that says mission first, right? Is it the mission first, or is it the men first and women? I had females in my platoon as well. Um, and I write about them, write about some in the book, just advice from military women too. So, but these men and women are human beings. They're brothers and sisters, they're husbands and wives. But then the mission is go kill the enemy, right? And as a leader, we can get caught up in how we look, right, to higher ups, how quick we were there, when did we get to the grid coordinate, how effective we were in what we did. And I was in the training situation where we were training units to go deploy. So it was a lot of war gaming out in the desert. And so I wrote this book as a way of trying to inject objectivity by looking at the hard science of leadership and neurophysiology. I got a master's in psych. And so in this book, I cite and reference peer-reviewed journal publications on neurobiology and things of that to understand why be a healthy leader. What does it mean when you use kind words to somebody, neurologically speaking? What does it mean when a black belt teaches you how to breathe, to control your ego? What is that doing to the brain, to the left and right hemisphere, to your brainstem, to your prefrontal cortex? Because when you talk to a soldier about warm, fuzzy emotions, there a lot of, my buddies who are NCOs who've been to war, before they ever saw therapy, some of them still don't want to. They're not going to respect talking about feelings because they had to operate in situations where their feelings wouldn't keep them alive, right? So where I connect with them is when we talk about the hardwiring of the brain, right? Because then that's what they respect. They respect the fact that there's an engine inside of their skull, right? There's a computing mechanism in their skull that at the same time can validate their feeling states. But they don't want to talk about feelings because they've had to compartmentalize and downplay that so much. But when you can validate the guy sitting across from you by telling him like, "Hey man, your pistons are red hot right now in that engine." That's something they understand because you liken it to the vehicle in the field, right? If we're driving up with Humvees and tracked vehicles and 10-ton trucks right up the hill, and for Lord knows, man, if it's 125 degrees in the desert, we've got to do a friggin' full stop on that convoy movement because something's overheating. There's a gasket blowing out coolant or hot oil on a soldier right now. We got to figure out, So I try to tell them if we're going to maintain our vehicles and our weapons, why aren't you maintaining your brain? Because if you think you can go through all this stuff, you got to understand, and this is what I would tell the guys, when you're reacting to your wife like that, when you're reacting to life like that, I have a buddy who won't mention his name, but when he goes out to bars, somebody ends up with a broken jaw, and it's never him. Okay. At some point, I'm like, bro, you got to look at the situation and realize, man, like after 3 or 4 broken jaws, something's going on in you that you got to look at, and you deserve to look at it. Um, and I wrote this book to kind of mull this over in my own mind and just to reprocess all the things that I did right, but then the things that I've done wrong as well. Do you know what I'm saying? I wanted an honest look. So when I look at the soldiers, they were like my kids, man. They're like my kids, my brothers. Um, I was 32 when I joined. One of my best friends was 18 years old when I met him in basic training at Fort Jackson. And we started grappling together. He's this big boy from Ohio, right? The dude's got grips like you wouldn't believe, man. He's 18 years old when I met him. He's 21 now. And still one of my best friends. Love this guy. And so we bonded over grappling on just the friggin' hard concrete floors together. But man, I'm sorry. I'm just now thinking about Brent and those good times in the bays. But yeah, I love these guys, man, because as a leader, I was an officer, right? And so if I gave an order, they'd go do it, man. And if it risked their lives, they'd get it done. There's one thing I learned about soldiers. It's they feel and look invincible when you give them a job to do. They don't have fear, man. They go in there and they do it. And that made me want to be a better leader for their sake. Because if I had an ego issue, right, they're going to feel that. If I'm so insecure as a leader and I need validation, let's say because I didn't get validation from my dad, I was desperate for validation from the guy above me, then I would use my soldiers. Go do this mission. I don't care about your safety. You're going to get to this grid coordinate at this hit time, and you're going to send me this message so I can tell the higher ups how good of a leader I look, right? And then if I heard about what if a vehicle rolled over and a dude got killed, he got smashed by all the gear in the vehicle. Things get nasty fast when we're out there in that terrain and doing night convoy movements and all this stuff. And so it was so important for me to say, I don't care if someone says I suck as a leader. That's okay. Because if it keeps the guys and girls in my platoon safe, then I have to own that. I could have planned it better, or they could have given better orders, but we try to do a real life combat situation where it's supposed to get hairy, it's supposed to get complex fast, right? So you have a plan, but then you go out in the field and everything changes, right? The second you step, everything changes. It was comical, bro. Like it was comical. You knew exactly your mission until you turn on your engine. And they're like, by the way, everything you planned for, you're going here, you're doing this. So everyone's losing their minds. But it was so important to just um, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking about that stuff. So it was so important to check myself. So when I gave those orders and I talked to those men and women that I was leading, that I was respectful to them, dignity and respect, regardless of rank, is kind of my philosophy. But that I let them know if, let's say I'm stressed about something because I'm getting, barked at by someone else, I would let them know that. Like, hey guys, I'm salty right now. I'm super pissed. It's not you guys. I'm getting chewed out on this end. All right. You guys are doing fine. keep doing what you're doing. But if you see me act in a certain way, like I'm just, give me a second. Just give me, and there were times where I'd drop in the desert and just do push-ups, bro. Just pissed off. Like, let me crank out 25 push-ups real quick because somebody shouted something over the radio that made me want to like choke them out. And so again, leadership is it's a crazy concept because 1+1 is always two until you throw your ego in the situation. These problem sets, you're gonna start here, you're gonna move 30 kilometers over rough terrain and end up at this grid coordinate. All right, Roger, that's cool. We'll find the routes to get there. But then as you're moving your convoy, you have somebody tell you, like, you're not moving fast enough. And I need you to go do this too. Split up your element. Half your guys go this way, half your guys go that way. Okay, well, where are they getting chow? Where's the water resupply? Where's the fuel resupply? Like, you're telling me to split everyone up. But, I'm responsible for these guys. I can't just, and they want to know too. Hey, sir, can you give us the details on this? No, just go. Like, I can't do that. I gotta. And so, man, I'm really ranting right now. But anybody who's been in the military understands this. It's cool because this is what connects us as vets, the frustration that we all feel. But at the end of the day, it comes down to loving each other, man. That's I haven't been to war, but my buddies who have told me war zones are some of the purest places of love that they felt in their life because all they cared about was the people they served with, right? Their brothers in arms, making it back from their patrols in one piece. And I mean that literally in one piece. And they didn't care about how their uniforms look or who shaved. It was about, are they safe, right? And it's so important to kind of lead with that in mind rather than on the back end realize you lost somebody, whether it's to suicide or whether it's to an injury. Because, oh shoot, man, I barked that order out and I didn't really think clearly. I flexed my rank or flexed my ego and I didn't put into perspective, their resources, their vehicles, their avenue of approach or whatever it is. It's so important to give everyone a voice and yet at the same time be willing to override when you need to. So it's a complex situation, man. And I wrote this book to honestly as a way of easing my stress and anxiety after I got out. And again, talk about jiu-jitsu. And I'll shut up after this. I showed up to the mats. There's a guy that annoyed me a little bit and I reacted a little bit disrespectfully to him. I kind of threw him. We were doing throws, but I threw him with a little bit too much excitement and vigor. And so he was cool about it, but he was man. Okay. So I apologized to him, right? I told him, I said, hey, that was disrespectful. I'm sorry. Then I went to my coach. This was after I got out of the army, like a couple weeks. I went to my coach who's and he does combat jiu-jitsu. Like we do strikes with him. It's a really cool class. So he's an army vet. And I was like, hey coach, I gotta tell you something. I just disrespected the guy and I reacted. I have a lot of anger right now. I'm sorry. I just wanted to tell you that because I didn't want that guy to tell the coach because I respected the coach so much. I'd be upset at myself, right? Disappointed at myself if he heard through the grapevine that I was disrespectful. So I went straight up to coach and I was like, coach, I need to tell you this. So I told on myself. And, he told me, he's like, look, you just got out of the military, right? I'm like, yeah, that's right, coach. And he saw it on my face, man. He saw it on my face. Like, listen, you and I are going to roll one-on-one. All right. And anytime you need me to fight you, let me know and I'll do it. We'll go on the side mat. I train at Jocko Willing's gym, right? So Victory, where Jocko's at. So he's like, we'll go on Jocko's mat. I'll beat you up and then we'll go back to class. And he's like, I don't care that I'm the coach. I'll have someone else. I'll grab another black belt, brown belt, whoever, have them coach the class. But I'll give you that attention because I know what you're going through and I'm going to help you through that. Bro, of course I start tearing up. I'm like, geez, thanks, coach. And he did it, man, because I showed up. He came out to me, hey, how's it going? And when he made direct eye contact, guess where my eyes were, right? I was looking down. I couldn't make eye contact. So he knew I was off. So he's like, hey, man, come here. So he pulled me. I'm trying not to get emotional right now. And in fact, I'm going to open mat after we get done with this podcast. I'm stoked, man. I'm going to go see Jocko today. But he pulled me aside and man, he wailed on me, dude, but in love. I mean, he submitted me, but he didn't. So as soon as he's like, nope, don't tap. Don't tap. I'm not doing it. And then he'd switch up the submission for 5 minutes straight. And I was 110% just pouring it out. And he's just chilling. Coach is just chilling, right? Balling me up every which way. Choke. Oh, I want to tap. Nope. Let go. Submit the, grab the ankle, grab the knee, break everything on my body. Not actually injuring me, but and then dude, it was awesome, man. It was really cool because after that match, I mellowed out. I accessed some feelings, dude. I started tearing up. And coach was like, "Hey, man, hell yeah, I'm proud of you. Like you needed that, and we did that, right? We got that out of you." And then after that, there's a retired Navy SEAL who's there, and he grabbed me right after. I was like, "Hey, come here, man," because he saw I was getting emotional, dude. He saw those tears welling up, and I'm not ashamed of it, bro, because these guys are warriors, bro. So if I'm gonna cry in front of badasses like them, I know they got my back. So the SEAL buddy, he grabbed me and was like, "Hey, man, we're gonna train some more," And he again made sure I was in my breath, right in my body, and dude, it was brilliant, man. So I had no idea how much anger I had. I had no idea how much repressed emotion I had after the military. And dude, that wouldn't have helped me on a therapy couch. But you put me on the mats with these brothers, with these warriors, and it was a feeling that's indescribable. It's indescribable, man. And I have a debt of gratitude to them.
I have to say, this is probably one of the more emotional episodes. There's been a couple moments here where I caught myself kind of tearing up. I was like, "Damn, dude, that he's striking a nerve with me." So
Yeah,
thank
bro.
you for sharing all of that. One of the things I was thinking about there, especially at the end, where you're saying you're not afraid to, in front of these badasses, cry.
Yeah, man. Hell yeah.
One thing that I always find, I'm a crier. I have no issue with letting people know I'm a crier. It goes back to this thing, and I talked about this with my buddy the other day, and it's something that is being addressed in therapy right now, and discussed.
Yeah, once you get access to those feelings, bro, it's a lot easier for them to come up for sure. That's the cool part. And by the way, if you can choke somebody out, like I've been made fun of a lot in my life, like, "Oh, you're sensitive. Oh, you're crying. Look, Dan's crying." I'm like, "Bro, say that again, dude." And I know how to put you in the rear naked. And not even like overcompensating, but just knowing that helped me a lot. Because there's certain people in my life that I can count on to be bullies about my sensitivity. But because of jujitsu, I'm like, bro, I'll fully own it, man. And if you ever want to see how sensitive I can get, if it comes to physicality, like grab me, dude, grab my collar, you know. And just knowing that I could do that just makes me that much more comfortable owning who I am. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And that's exactly it right there. Always remind people, it's like, look, I am a crier, but also remember I can beat your ass.
Yeah,
So
buddy.
you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to poke fun? Number one. But number two, like you said, you're crying in front of these badasses. And I said to my buddy the other day, in addition to that other statement, is that the people that can beat my ass wouldn't make fun of me
Right.
for having emotions. The people who can't touch me are the ones that got something to say. Say it from a distance. And I said to my buddy also, kind of in thinking about it, it's like, I'm quick to go to violence when it's like, "Hey, man, yeah, I cry, but I can beat your ass." And it's like, maybe that's not the healthiest spot, but it's a fact though. It's like, if you want to be a bully about things, because that's where it's really coming from. It's coming from a place of bullying. Oh, you're crying. Oh, you're soft. Oh, you're weak. I had a friend who would make little snide comments like that. And he fancies himself a man's man, a tough guy, badass, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And it's like, I remember his wife apologized for something. It was something simple. And he goes, "Don't apologize. It's a sign of weakness." And I was like, I apologize all the time, and I'm far from weak. And also, I cry. As a matter of fact, I'll beat your ass, and I'll cry while I'm doing it. So just keep these things in mind. Watch how you talk to people. Be polite. Be nice. Like, you don't have to overcompensate. You don't have to say these things to make yourself seem bad, and strong and tough. I mean, just be a good
Mm,
person. You're a strong person. Show you're a strong person by being reliable, by being, loving, by, caring about your team, caring about your squad, caring about your family, things
yeah.
like that. Versus, and this friend was at one point a boss of mine for a
Mm,
brief period. And he wasn't a terrible leader, but there are times he would do things that made me feel like that I've got some questions as to why you're bringing this up now versus when we were just sitting here for 20 minutes by ourselves and you didn't bring it up to me until we got an audience. So
yeah.
it's little things like that.
Flexing,
But
flexing on you.
yeah, and it's like, and there was always this thing that I would always, again, remind him, off clock, I can beat your ass. And the thing is, and I've just come to the realization of this is like it takes a lot more to just be calm about that situation than
Mm,
to just unload on them and then say, "Yeah, I beat your ass," because no
yeah.
one really wins in that situation. Yes, I beat him up. I look tough, but also I'm an emotional person. I'm gonna have
Mm,
a lot of emotion to that later on in the day. Thinking about
yep.
it, like, why did I react that way?
Ruminating.
You know, so, like this has all been like a big ass therapy session for me. So,
Hey,
but,
real quick, I gotta say,
thank you.
I had to cut to a couple people out of my life who did exactly what your buddy did. They'd be one person in front of me. So as a dyad, we call that in psychology. But as a triad, you introduce a third person to our dynamic, they completely change. They flex, they posture themselves, they put me down in order to gain credibility in front of that other person's eyes. And because I had words for this, because I was able to understand the psychological implications of this, I was able to then say I'd give them a few chances, right? But then I had to cut them out of my life because if somebody in your life says you tell them like, hey bro, what you did hurt me, upset me, violated some sort of boundary, however you want to say it, okay, and they say nope, you're just sensitive, or they say I didn't do that, or I'm sorry, I didn't know I did that, I won't do it, but then they keep doing it. At some point that you have to remove that person. That's not a healthy person to be in a relationship with, in a friendship with, whatever, roommate, boss, I don't care what it is, your commander. You've got to create distance from that person, get them out of your life, because they'll always try to introduce that cognitive dissonance because they're compensating for something. And there was something else you said that about sort of being nice to other people and kind to other people. And I want to say that, like, obviously being nice is not a sign of weakness. And we learned this from black belts, right? And what's important is that we're protectors of others, especially for those of us, like if anybody's listening to this podcast who's been abused, who's especially as a kid, man, if you've been knocked around in a way or touched or hurt in a way that like complete boundary violation by an adult, like there's nothing better than being an adult who's a protector of others. And love can look violent if it needs to be. I mean, look at the military, dude. I mean, we're talking about, shooting somebody in the face to protect those that are standing next to you, right? Who are in the uniform that you're wearing. And they're not apologizing for that. Yeah, there's weight to taking a life for sure. And I don't want to downplay that. But these service members, man, are willing to lay down their lives, and they're definitely willing to make the enemy lay down their life, right? To keep people safe. And so being strong can look super calm, just like a black belt, right? Super at ease in their skin, very gentle. But the second they need to execute a move, bro, people are flying feet towards the ceiling as they're crashing down, right? That I think is the beautiful part about jujitsu, teaching us to throttle violence, to not be ashamed of it. And I always tell people this, man, especially young service members. I have a lot of friends right now who are in buds, who are going to be Navy SEALs, friends that are going in the Green Beret pipeline. And I'm loving on these guys now that I'm out. I'm just trying to tell them about leadership and teach them about their worth. I tell them, like, first of all, just because you're the lowest ranking guy in the room doesn't mean you're the most unimportant. You're actually the most important guy in the room, because who's going to get shot in the face first? It's the lower enlisted guys and gals that are going in there first. So therefore, when we give us a brief as an officer, um, super important to acknowledge that their sacrifice comes first. So they have the most value. They're the VIPs in the room. That's how I perceive them. And the second thing is I tell them, and because of jujitsu, like, don't ever apologize for your aggression. Like, never apologize for the aggression you have. Throttle it, control it, learn to respect it, and learn to use it. Not weaponize it, but to correctly use it for the appropriately for the situation. So the level of violence you're getting hit with, you got to match that, or you got to up it to take it out. Um, but it's important to do that not selfishly, but to protect others. So again, we can talk about the philosophy of all this stuff later, but dude, this was such a fun podcast, man. If you want, we can go another freaking hour and a half. Easy.
Trust me, if like I looked at the day, so I actually didn't realize. I thought I had someone else scheduled for next Sunday, and they text was like, "So we're
Mm.
good for Sunday, right?" And I was like,
Oh,
"What?" And then
dude, bring him on. We'll
then
have a panel. No, I'm
I
kidding.
had to look at like my times with you, and I was like, okay, he's on the West Coast, so this is all gonna work. Okay, perfect.
Nice.
Because I oftentimes overbook my days, and I don't really consider like oh, bathroom breaks. You might want to go have lunch. Oh, you also have a family upstairs. You might want to go, I don't know, go play video games with your daughter, talk about the day with your wife and figure out, hey, what are we doing next weekend as a family? But
Mm,
I get so racked up. And once in a while, I'll have like that heavy weekend where I'll do like 6 or 7 recordings in like 2 days just to
yeah.
have everything stacked. So
Yep.
then I don't have to do it all later on. But yeah, this was great. I would love to have you back on and just talk some more because I do, like I said, I have notes and questions, but it's like we just went into conversation that was just so much more like it
This
felt
is real.
more conducive to what was going on. It's like, okay, I like this. Let's like screw these questions.
Mm,
Let's talk. Like let's open up and just put it on the table. And I loved it, every bit of it. Like I said, this was a therapy session for me because there's a lot of stuff that you said that really, really hit home and got me really thinking. You got some emotion out of me. So Dan, thank you for doing this. Thank you for making the time. Uh, Before we get out of here, any shout outs or mentions that you'd like to put out there into the podcast world for us?
I mean, first of all, thank you so much for having me and giving me a voice. And just on behalf of the Joes, thank you for hearing their story too. And if anybody wants to check me out, they can go to my website, combatpsych.com, and you can check out other podcasts and preview the book as well. I hope it helps. I put the nuggets of advice that touched my heart on the website. So you don't have to buy the book. You can just scour it. And just one of my buddies, JP Lane, he's a double amputee, lost both of his legs in combat. I think it was a 200-pound IED. And he always says this phrase, and I borrow it from him whenever someone thanks him for his service. He always looks at them in their eyes and says, "You're worth it." And to any veteran out there who's struggling, who's thinking about not being here tomorrow, and you might be ashamed of stuff you've done, stuff you've seen, whatever it is in life, man, you're worth it. Seeking out whatever it is that's going to heal you, um, self enrichment, like self understanding, self disclosure. The process is ugly, it's heavy, but remember that you're worth it. Don't feel like you're unworthy, because that'll keep you isolated, that'll keep you stuck. And so, follow your heart in pursuing the healthy outlets in life. Start jujitsu, find a tribe, get in a group, especially if you're a vet, man. Roll with other vets. And for goodness sakes, man, own the weirdness, dude. I dare you to go tell another vet that you're emotional and see them make fun of you, because they're not. If you tell another vet you're going through something, dude, we're going to understand, like, hell yeah, bro. Trust me. You want to know some of the stuff I've gone through? Like, dude, let me be there with you alongside you, because that's the love I got. I never ran into a vet or a military service member, man, on the mats who would ever look at me and say, "You're weak, you're a coward, you're this, you're that." Never, man. They look me in my eyes, they'll give me that fist bump, and they'll say, like, I got your back, dude. That right there, I needed that, man. I seriously, and I still need it. And I don't want anybody else. Like, I didn't want to lose a soldier to suicide, man. And I'm lucky I didn't. I really consider myself blessed in that regard. And I don't want anyone else out there to have to take themselves out, and guys like Austin, who lost 13 dudes. I mean, that's not right, man. Um, So you're worth it. That's all I gotta say. You'll figure it out. Just start with worthiness, and then you'll be led to the places you got to go to find that healing, man. Hopefully it's the mats, and if it is, come choke me out because I could probably use it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'll be sure to put the links and everything in the show notes for everyone to find. As always, to everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for listening. Uh, this podcast doesn't function without the guests. It doesn't function without you as the listeners. So thank you. If you have any questions, concerns, criticisms, feel free to reach out. You can find me at bjj.wiki on Instagram. You can find me at Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. You can email me. And I always joke about this because I say don't email me because I don't really check my emails, but actually I do because that's how Dan found me. So like,
Thank you
we
so
got through
much,
the
bro.
emails and I was like, oh my God, like this is a real
This is
person. It's
so
not
cool,
not
man.
a
This is
scammer.
sick. Thanks for giving me a
So
shot, dude.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, if you all need to get a hold of me, you can reach me through the emails. Just make sure it looks like a real email because I get some emails that look like scammers, and I'm like, no, not happening. Um, I want to give a big shout out again here to our guest, Dan Joseph. Go check
Thank you.
out the book, Backpack to Rucksack. And again, I'll put the links in the show notes. So if you all are interested, please go check it out. And just based off the conversation here, you know, you're gonna get a good sense of what he's trying to preach to us and what he's just trying to explain and help us to understand. So thank you to Dan, and then also big shout outs to my crew over at Nerd Rage Radio: Bobby, Chris, Joe, Marilyn, Phil, Ricky Ticky. I, I don't, I need to write a list next to me. There's a lot of y'all, but shout out to you guys. If it wasn't for Nerd Rage Radio, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this
Mm.
podcast. I started with those guys and decided, it's time to branch out and do my own thing. And look at that. Your boy's walking now. I got my own legs. I'm a real boy. Um, Also another shout out here to my other podcast, So You Like Horror. If you're into scary movies, if you're into just horror content in general, we've got, some movies we've reviewed. We've got a horror book that we've reviewed that we're going to be discussing and putting up an episode for very, very soon. Go check that out. It's called So You Like Horror Podcast. You can find us on Instagram. All the words separated by underscore. So You Like Horror. And also, if you're on Facebook, we got the discussion group going up now. So if you want to jump in there, talk about some horror movies, give some suggestions, reach out so you want to be a guest. Feel free, hop on board, let us know. We have no issues with saying, come on, let's talk some scary movies. Otherwise, thank you everyone for just again all the support. And again, I know I've been mentioning this a lot. 3 years. Didn't think I was going to get past 3 episodes. So 3 years in, and I'm loving it. And looking back at all the support from day one and seeing it still now is amazing. So thank you, everyone. You guys keep listening. We're going to keep making these shows. Thank you, everyone. And goodbye.
Deeper with it. Now let me sing a song.